I woke up that morning, like any other, my alarm buzzing obnoxiously at 5:30 a.m. It was still dark outside, and the winter chill seeped through the cracks of my window. But that wasn't new. I had 7 years of doing this, grinding it out at Cresmont Technologies. 7 years of working late, eating cold takeout at my desk, chasing deadlines that seemed to get more impossible every week. And for what? To build my life around something that had no room for me, really. But I wasn't bitter. At least not yet. I still believed it was all worth it. That this routine, these endless hours, the missed birthdays, anniversaries, all the little things I couldn't even remember because I was always working, wasn't for nothing. The promotion was coming. It had to be. I'd paid my dues. I had to believe that. So, when I straightened my tie that morning, I told myself it was just another routine evaluation, just another box to check off. I'd been through this before, right? Another meeting, another list of targets, another chance to impress the bosses, especially Frederick. I'd been working under him for years, and while I hated the way he ran things, cold, calculating, ruthless, I couldn't deny that he had power. And that power had always trickled down to me. I was ready for the next step. I walked into the conference room, expecting the usual sterile white walls and polished glass table. But today, it felt colder, emptier, like something was about to change. Frederick was there, sitting at the head of the table as usual, his face unreadable, like a stone statue. His hands were folded neatly in front of him, as if the whole world was in his control, and I was just a small player in his game. But I wasn't nervous. Not yet. "Good morning, Daniel," he said, his voice as emotionless as always. "Have a seat." I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to act like everything was normal, even though I could feel the tension in the air. As I sat down, the HR manager, Linda, pushed a folder toward me. She didn't even look me in the eye, just stared down at the table like she was trying to avoid making any eye contact. I opened my mouth to say something, but then Frederick spoke again. "Daniel, we've decided to let you go. Performance issues." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. My mind was racing, and everything around me seemed to blur, like I wasn't even in the room. Performance issues? I had been giving my all. 7 years of my life, my sweat, my energy. My soul was wrapped up in this company, and this was how they repaid me. I stared at him, waiting for some explanation, some reason why, but none came. "You're being let go," Frederick repeated, his voice sharp as a knife. "Take your things and leave. There's no need to drag this out." He didn't even blink, just sat there like it was the most natural thing in the world. I was nothing more than a number on a sheet. I looked at the folder in front of me, the severance package and legal documents sitting there as if they had just been waiting for me. I reached for it, my hands shaking uncontrollably. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt the hot sting of humiliation crawling up my neck. No argument, no appeal, just a simple dismissal. I left the room, the door closing softly behind me. It was like walking through a fog, a haze of disbelief. I could hear the faint hum of voices in the office lobby, people who had once admired me, now looking away as I passed by, pretending not to notice. I didn't care. It wasn't about them. It was about what had just happened to me. I wasn't even sure what to do next. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but it felt like the world had just slipped out from under me. I stepped outside, and the winter air hit me like a slap in the face. The cold felt different now, biting at my skin. I glanced up at the clear blue sky, but it didn't bring me any comfort. It was just a reminder of how everything had just crumbled. I didn't know what I was feeling: shock, anger, sadness, or just a numbness that made it hard to breathe. I climbed into my car, fingers gripping the steering wheel as I started the engine. I couldn't believe what had just happened. What do I even say to Clara when I get home? Clara, my wife, my partner. She was the one person I thought would always be by my side. She had to understand. She'd be pissed, right? Furious at the injustice of it all. We'd face it together. That's what I kept telling myself on the drive home. When I pulled into the driveway, something felt off. The house looked too quiet, too still. No lights on, no sign of life. My stomach twisted, but I told myself to calm down. It was nothing. It couldn't be anything. But as I walked inside, I felt the shift in the air. It wasn't like the house I knew. The warmth was gone. Clara was standing there by the door, looking so calm, too calm. "Hey," I said, forcing a smile. "You won't believe what happened, babe. She cut me off, her voice cold, almost clinical. "I'm leaving you." I blinked. I thought I misheard her, but there it was, clear as day. I stood there, frozen. What do you say to that? My heart was hammering in my chest, but no words came out. I felt like I was in a bad dream. She didn't say anything more, just handed me an envelope. It wasn't a letter or some warm message. It was like she was giving me a package to drop off at the post office. I opened it, and there they were. Divorce papers. Divorce papers. The last thing I expected, the last thing I ever imagined would happen. But here they were, staring me in the face. And on top of that, a brochure for a local homeless shelter. Her voice was flat, void of any emotion when she said, "You're useless now." The word hit me like a punch to the gut. Useless. I didn't even recognize the person standing in front of me anymore. She was a stranger, someone who had no problem walking away from everything we had built together. I didn't beg. I didn't argue. There was no point. I grabbed my stuff, my bag, and walked out without saying another word. I didn't even look back. Outside, the cold was biting. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears. The world around me was still, like everything had come to a complete stop. I was empty. The house, the life, the love I thought we had. It was all gone. Just like that. In the days that followed, I didn't know where I was going or what to do. It felt like everything had been ripped away from me in an instant. The pain of it all was suffocating at times, but I refused to let it consume me. I refused to be the broken man they thought I would become. My pride, my anger, my humiliation, they were all burning inside me, but I kept them contained. I couldn't let them see me fall apart. Not now. I spent most of my nights sleeping in my car, some nights in motel rooms on the edge of town, the kind of places you wouldn't want to be caught dead in. The fluorescent lights flickered above me as I stared at the cracked ceiling, trying to sleep, trying to breathe. But it was hard. So hard. Alone, in the quiet, I could hear the weight of everything that had just happened, everything that I had lost. But the funny thing is, somewhere in the midst of that pain, I started changing. I wasn't the same Daniel I used to be. The man who had worked himself to the bone, who had tried so hard to prove himself worthy of the respect he never got. That version of me was fading. The betrayal had forged a new version of me, someone colder, sharper, more determined. I could feel it happening. I could feel the shift in the way I thought, the way I saw things. I wasn't going to be the victim, not anymore. I started putting things together piece by piece. My mind, once clouded with disbelief, began to clear. The anger started to shape into something more controlled, more calculated. The man they thought they had discarded wasn't broken. He was just biding his time. And when the moment came, they would realize just how wrong they had been. I wasn't going to seek revenge through outbursts or emotional outpourings. No, my revenge would be much quieter, much more effective. I had been playing their game for years, pretending to be just another cog in the machine, just another worker, just another employee. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. Cressmont Industries had been my life for 7 years, but it was also my playground. I had built things there, quietly, carefully, under their noses. I wasn't just some employee. I was the architect behind many of their so-called successes. All those mergers, those acquisitions, the deals that had made the company what it was, most of them had been my doing. They just never knew it. And now it was time to use that knowledge, those connections I had built up over the years. I wasn't going to just walk away with my tail between my legs. I wasn't going to let Frederick and Clara think they had won. No, I would dismantle everything they had worked so hard to build. But I would do it slowly, methodically. I started small. A missed contract here, a failure in the delivery process there, a slight delay that no one would suspect, but it would cause the cracks to form. They wouldn't even know what hit them. They would think it was just bad luck, bad timing. But I knew better. I knew I was slowly chipping away at their empire. I had already begun the process of destabilizing their financial footing. The first signs were already starting to show. The company's stock started to dip just slightly. A few deals began to fall through. The suppliers who once trusted them were starting to question their reliability. It was all going to fall apart, but not immediately. It would take time. And that's exactly what I had. As for Clara, she was still trying to maintain this image of strength, of having made the right decision. She was probably sitting there, trying to spin some sort of narrative that painted her as the victim, as if I was the one who had let everything slip through my fingers. But deep down, I knew she could feel it. The weight of everything that had changed. She was too proud to admit it, but I knew she could sense the shift. She was trying to control the narrative, trying to make herself look like the woman who had been wronged, but I wasn't buying it. What really amused me was that Clara had no idea how much I knew. She was still caught up in her own web of lies, trying to move forward with her life as if nothing had happened. But I saw through it. She thought she had everything in her hands. But the truth was, she was already starting to lose her grip on everything. And as I watched her from the shadows, I couldn't help but smile. Just a little. Because I knew how this story would end. She had no idea that the same man she had discarded so easily was the one who was going to bring everything she had worked for crashing down. But it wasn't just her. It was Frederick, too. The man who had dismissed me like I was nothing more than a blip on his radar. The man who had thrown me out without a second thought. He thought I was weak. He thought I was finished. But he had no idea what I was capable of. I wasn't done with them. Not by a long shot. I would let them enjoy their little victories for now. But when the time came, they would wish they had never crossed me. And I would be there, waiting, in the shadows, watching as everything they built crumbled beneath their feet. The days kept slipping by, one after another. At first I thought the pain of being discarded, left behind, would break me. But it didn't. The sting of abandonment was still there, deep in my gut. But it didn't control me anymore. I was beyond that. I was something different now. Something sharper, colder, and more dangerous. I wasn't the same guy who'd spent sleepless nights trying to prove himself to Clara, to Frederick, to the whole damn world. No, that guy was gone. The new Daniel? He had a different plan. I could feel it inside me, this new energy. Every day, I moved further away from the person they thought they had dismissed. The person who had once believed in the so-called loyalty of family and friends, the man who trusted his wife. It was all a lie. And now I was going to make them see that. I didn't need to scream or shout. I didn't need a public breakdown. My revenge? It was something quieter, something they wouldn't even notice until it was too late. I had spent years carefully building the perfect plan, setting the stage, pulling strings behind the scenes. The company, the empire that Frederick had so proudly built, was already beginning to crack. But they didn't know it yet. They were still going about their business like everything was fine, like they were untouchable. Cresmont Industries was beginning to fall apart. I had already started dismantling their financial stability, rerouting investments, and creating enough chaos to make their once strong foundation tremble. The first signs were small. Just a delayed payment here, a missed deadline there. But they all added up. Investors were starting to ask questions. Suppliers were pulling out of long-term agreements. And I was just sitting back, watching it unfold. It was almost poetic, how easily everything they had built was slipping away. I knew the cracks were starting to show when the investors, the same people who had once sung Frederick's praises, started to question his leadership. His so-called vision was crumbling under scrutiny, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. As for Clara, she was still trying to play the role of the perfect wife, the one who had been wronged, the victim of some great injustice. She probably thought the world was still on her side. But I knew better. She had no idea what was coming. She was too focused on her own image, her own social media posts, trying to make herself look like the victim. She was the one who had let me go, after all. She was the one who had tossed me aside like a tool when I was no longer useful to her. I wondered, as I watched her from afar, how long it would take her to realize that the world had started to see through her facade. She didn't care about me, not really. She only cared about what I could provide. And now that I was gone, she was slowly losing her grip on everything she'd built. But as much as I hated what she had done, I couldn't help but be intrigued by her downfall. I watched as she struggled to hold on to the image she had so carefully crafted. Every new post, every staged photo, every tearful story, it was all starting to feel fake. People were starting to see it too. The followers were dwindling. The brand deals were falling apart. Clara's carefully built empire of likes and fake smiles was cracking, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. What amused me the most was how unaware she was of the situation. She thought she could just move on, as if nothing had happened, as if I didn't matter. But I knew how this story would play out. She wouldn't be able to outrun the truth, not this time. As for Frederick, his days were numbered. The old man thought he was invincible, that no one could touch him, that his company, his legacy, would outlast everything. But he didn't see the storm coming. And the best part? He didn't even realize I was the one who had been quietly stirring the waters, setting everything up for the perfect collapse. I didn't need to be in the room when things started falling apart. I didn't need to watch it happen right in front of me. All I needed was to sit back and enjoy the show from a distance. I didn't need to lift a finger. My plan was in motion, and nothing could stop it now. The irony of it all was too sweet. They thought they had discarded me, thought they had erased me from the equation. They thought they had won, that I was nothing more than a blip in their lives. But I knew better. I knew I was the one who held the cards. They had underestimated me, and now they were going to pay the price. It wasn't just about the money, or the power, or the victory. It was about showing them that they had never really seen me. They had thought I was weak, small, inconsequential, but I wasn't. Not anymore. As I sat in my small, dimly lit apartment, far from the life I had once known, I felt a strange calm wash over me. Everything I needed to do had already been set in motion. The game was in play, and the pieces were falling into place. I wasn't rushing anything. I wasn't forcing anything. I just had to wait. because when the time came, when the walls finally crumbled, they would know. They would understand who they had really been dealing with. The moment of the final blow came faster than anyone could have expected. It happened during a high-stakes board meeting that Frederick had called, believing it was his last chance to save what was left of his empire. The room was full of his usual supporters, those who had once sworn by his leadership, his vision. They all believed that Frederick could fix the mess, that he could somehow spin the situation around, but none of them knew what was really coming. I watched from a distance, my heart beating steadily in my chest, calm and controlled. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. My proxy, someone I trusted implicitly, entered that boardroom carrying the files that would bring everything crashing down. Those papers, those carefully forged documents, they were the proof that Frederick and Clara had hoped no one would find. Financial manipulations, hidden debts, forged contracts, and worst of all, text messages between Clara and Frederick, plotting behind closed doors. Everything they thought they had hidden was laid bare. As soon as those documents were presented, the room fell into chaos. I could hear the murmurs from miles away, even though I wasn't physically present. The board members, the investors, the very people who had once been in awe of Frederick's power, started to scramble. The stock of Cresmont plummeted within minutes. Investors pulled their support, citing irreparable damage and breach of trust. The room that once respected Frederick now buzzed with shock and disbelief. His empire, the one he had built from the ground up, was crumbling, and he hadn't even seen it coming. It was almost too easy. They didn't know that while they were celebrating their dominance, I was quietly pulling every string, setting every trap. I didn't need to be there in person. I didn't need to witness the panic firsthand. All I had to do was ensure that the right people were in the right place, at the right time. It was all falling apart for them, and I didn't have to lift a finger. Frederick, the man who thought he was untouchable, was now a broken figure. His hands trembled as he tried to explain the unexplainable. The lies, the deceit, the empire he'd built on false promises. It was all laid bare in front of him. No amount of bluster or arrogance could save him now. His empire had fallen because of his own arrogance and my careful planning. And then there was Clara. She had tried so hard to play the victim, to manipulate the narrative, to make it seem like she was the innocent party. But now she couldn't hide anymore. The truth was too obvious. She had been complicit in it all. The whispers began, and the realization spread through the boardroom like wildfire. She wasn't the victim. She was just as guilty as Frederick. The truth she had desperately tried to shield from the world, was out in the open. She couldn't control it anymore. Everything she had worked so hard to build, the image, the reputation, was crumbling around her. I watched as her face went pale, as she realized that the very thing she had feared most was happening. The facade she had created was collapsing, and there was no one left to help her. She had lost control. No amount of media manipulation or social media stunts could save her now. She had become the very thing she had always tried to avoid. Irrelevant. But even in her fall, I felt no satisfaction. This wasn't about her or Frederick or the petty revenge of seeing them suffer. This was about something bigger. It was about reclaiming my life, my future, and taking control of the narrative they had stolen from me. The world could now see who I truly was. Not the weak, discarded man they had cast aside, but the one who had always been pulling the strings from the shadows. And while they scrambled to salvage whatever they could, I was already moving forward. I had no interest in revenge that would burn bright and quickly. That wasn't me. I had something more lasting in mind. The collapse of Cresmont was just the beginning. My ascent had already started, and I was moving far beyond their reach. I wasn't angry. I wasn't vengeful in the way most people would expect. I was calm. In fact, I felt nothing but peace. Because the real victory, the one that mattered, wasn't in watching them fall. It was in knowing that I had orchestrated it all. They had underestimated me, and that was their mistake. I didn't need their apologies. I didn't need their acknowledgement. I didn't need anything from them anymore. I had built my own future, and it was more powerful than anything they could ever achieve. So, as I watched from a distance, I knew something they didn't. I had won, not because of what they had lost, but because of what I was about to build. And when the dust settled, they would realize that the man they had discarded wasn't just a pawn in their game. He was the one who had always controlled the board.